Welcome to the Big Board Draft podcast, where we are doing a special series of how to scout by position. Credit to Seth Murphy for coming up with this idea and love with it. It's going to be a great series, so be sure to follow along. We're starting off with the most important position on the football team, obviously the quarterback, and there is nobody better in the business than my friend Derrik Klassen at QB class. Derek, how you doing today, my man?
I'm doing pretty good. We just got off school for spring break. Today was our last day, so I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, I feel you about that spring break thing, man. Month starts this week also.
Nice.
So we're going to dive right into the quarterback class. Obviously, going back to last year with Teddy Bridgewater, his size of his knees. There's just so much talk about size. So for you, when watching quarterback, how much does size matter?
The thing with size is, it's about density, not necessarily about height, because, height can be overcome by understanding angles, knowing when, if there's going to be a defensive lineman in your throwing lane, knowing, to get around that, whether with an angle or, a different drop or something like that. So height can be overcome. That was something Russell Wilson's really good at, even Drew Brees. But, you got to look at density. If he's short but is also very well built, like a Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's stocky for his size, but then you look at say a Brett Smith. His height could have been overcome, but he was really light in his frame, and Johnny Manziel was the same way. That could definitely lead to some issues with injury in the NFL. If you don't know how to protect your body well enough.
Absolutely. Because obviously NFL is still a very violent game. So, you take those hits. Let's say you're playing. You could be 6'2", but if you're playing at 200 pounds with this thin frame, you're not going to have a very long season.
Exactly. And one of the best traits is availability. So.
Absolutely. And then another thing that we see a little bit talked about, it's decreasing a little bit less, but numbers and level of competition. A few years ago, this was still going on. People would make case for a player based off numbers, but then you look at guys like Colt Brennan out of Hawaii and some of the quarterbacks from Houston and elsewhere. So how much should numbers be weighed and level of competition the quarterback faces in an evaluation?
Well, with level of competition, especially if you're playing D1 for the most part, I think you're sound. Playing in the bigger conferences like the Pac-12 or something certainly helps. But if you're like a D2 guy or FCS, you definitely want to look like, if you're not looking superior, you're not gonna be good enough in the NFL. And then production-wise, I was actually just talking to Ben Natana about this earlier today. Good players produce, but not all players that produce are good. And that's where you get players like Colt Brennan. He produced, but that didn't mean he was good. But at the same time, bad players.
Hold up.
But at the same time, good players are always going to put up at least respectable statistics one way or another. The next thing I'll jump into is, how much do physical tools matter? And I have my own sort of grading system that I use. And as I got into it more, I realized, stuff like that isn't necessarily, the way I said it was, the things like that are more the colors to the painting as opposed to the painting itself. So, you can have a guy who has great arm strength, quickness in the pocket, open field ability, balance, all those traits, you name it. But if it doesn't come together and make, the great picture that you're looking for, these physical tools can only matter so much. And that's why, people are getting, I guess that was, part of the thing with Blaine Gabbert is, people thought, he had this incredible arm, he had the size, but then you look at him play, and he's a pretty god-awful quarterback. So, the physical tools, there's thresholds. Like, you have to have a good enough arm. You have to be quick enough. But to a certain extent, as long as you can get to those thresholds, and then you're doing everything else, well enough, especially mentally, the mental ability is a huge part to playing quarterback in the NFL. So as long as you can, put your physical tools together and make that painting that teams are looking for, and make your physical tools more than just colors and turn them into the painting, then that's what you're looking for out of a guy physically.
And I have returned. I apologize for the break of the mailman and the dog and all that fun stuff.
It's all good. Happens to the best of us.
Go ahead.
I was just getting over the physical tools part.
Yeah. So I mean, you talked about physical tools and looking at obstacles these quarterbacks face in transition to NFL. What are some of the major things that jump out to you about jumping from college to National Football League that in that rookie season that quarterbacks face?
It's not, for a lot of guys, especially the way college football is getting, is that, a lot of the concepts are different. And honestly, I'm pretty young. Maybe this was still a theme, way back, before I was into this. But especially now, you can see a lot of the offenses really aren't all that geared to the NFL. And you can make the argument that some NFL teams are changing. Philadelphia is. New Orleans been that way for a while. That kind of spread offense. Even Miami's getting into it with Lazor. So, you have these spread systems that create a lot of space. But in the NFL, no matter how well your offensive coordinator can, create that room, these NFL defenses are a lot faster, and these windows are going to be tighter, and you got to be able to hit those throws, whether the space should theoretically be there or not. And that's the worry, because these NFL defenses, even though there's a safety drought in the NFL, a lot of these safeties are still better than most of the college safeties you're going to face at the college level. They're faster, they're smarter, and they have experience on you. So I think more than anything, that's the big transition. And another one is being able to play composed and poised, because if you can't, I've always thought there were two different things. They've always the way I've seen it, they've been tossed around as the same word. But the way I see it is composure is, the ability to operate within the system and keep the offense on schedule, whereas poise is more, when the bullets start flying, you're able to make a play out of it. And that's something I've seen Matt Waldman talk about with Matt Leinart. He thought Leinart worked very well within the system. But, when bullets started flying, he kind of panicked and he was a different quarterback. And I even went back and watched Leinart. And I can agree with that. It was, him not being able to, put on his flak jacket and take the bullets and, get out of the pocket and make big throws when he needed to, was part of his big downfall. So I think, understanding new route concepts and that you're going to have to hit tighter windows in the NFL, along with being able to be composed and poised, are two very big things for transitioning.
Well, you mentioned Matt Leinart, and going back to the Rose Bowl against Texas, there was still
that last
final drive of the game. That last drive,
that last play was terrible.
No awareness for the situation, just not it.
Exactly.
If you told me it was his first time playing football, I would have believed it.
That was a terrible play. I remember there were 8-9 seconds left, and he's running around, and at least just get the ball out of your hand and at least have another shot at a Hail Mary or something in the next play. I remember watching that when I was watching Leinart, and that just, that infuriated me.
Well, Leinart at least did have fun with the parties and the women.
Got to win somewhere.
Absolutely. And then another thing you mentioned the windows in the NFL and jumping to college. With college, it's a side note, but like Kentucky basketball, people are saying, could they beat the 72-10 Chicago Bulls? But we didn't see that with college football in Alabama. Every year people were saying, well, could they beat an NFL team?
No,
they couldn't.
No, because the way you look at it, even if there's some players on, say, Alabama or Ohio State just won national championship, we'll use them. Even if let's say there's 15 guys on the roster, and that's overestimating, that are ready for the NFL. There's 53 that are ready on an NFL team. Even if some of those Ohio State players are a little better than some of these guys, no matter how you put it, this NFL team has 53 NFL, professional football players on it. You're not going to see a college team ever be able to go toe for toe with an NFL team.
Absolutely. I mean, even talking about Alabama and all this talk about their secondary, there's a lot of praise, but they get to the NFL and it has not worked out for them at all. Just they're not up to the speed of the game. So you're talking
Hmm.
about making that jump and safeties being able to close and closing those windows down. I mean,
Hmm.
there will be windows in college football where
Oh
it's
yeah.
a nice job fitting in, but in NFL, the
Hmm.
windows, if they're the size of a penny, you should be very happy.
Hmm. Yeah, and we're gonna get to Mariota a little bit later, but the thing with him, there's a lot of open lanes in Oregon's offense, and I don't think he can't hit NFL windows. I think he can. I think he's shown he can hit some windows. Um, but it's he's not having to do it nearly as often as say a Jameis Winston, um, and that's a little bit concerning. And it's not that I'm saying he can't. It's just that it's going to be a little bit new for him. And it's going to be interesting to see how he adjusts.
Absolutely. You know, one other point you brought up, and you brought about the spread quarterbacks, and one of the criticisms of Mariota, and I've been kind of not hesitant, but that's but wondering about it is about how will he translate to NFL. I get the about how he handles the pressure moment stuff and the windows, but the thing for me is about an NFL system and just thinking about an offense coordinator. Obviously, the level of competition will be much different, but an offense
Mm-hmm.
coordinator, if you're putting a top five pick in a quarterback, you should be tailoring your offense towards that quarterback.
Oh, I completely agree. I've talked about this when I was talking about Colin Kaepernick earlier this season. I think Colin Kaepernick is more talented, than Greg Roman let him be. Or I mean, early on, Greg Roman let Kaepernick look very good, but he tried making him something he's not, and that ultimately hurt the offense as a whole. I think you're right. If you're taking a quarterback that high, you to some extent you kind of have to expect that he's going to develop and understand some of the concepts you want, but at the same time it's a mutual relationship. You got to help him out too, and help him make plays. Um, and that's definitely huge for development because if you're making it easier on him, he's going to be able to be more confident. He's going to understand oh, I can make these throws, I can do this, that type of stuff.
Absolutely. You know, you mentioned development. There's a lot of talk always about can this guy develop looking 3, 4 years ahead? Where can
Hmm.
he be with the work of NFL coaches? What are your thoughts on the idea of developing a quarterback in the present state of the NFL?
Development is a sham. Like it doesn't really exist that much. I mean, you have a few anomalies. Aaron Rodgers definitely became a different player than he was at Cal. Um, but an example I like to use is Cam Newton. Cam Newton didn't necessarily develop, he adjusted. If you look at Cam Newton, in college and look at him now, he still has a lot of the flaws that he had in college. He's still, his internal clock isn't all that great. He can't really anticipate throws all that well. His mechanics get really shoddy. Um, they're a little better, but it's still, you have these moments where it's just awful. He's not stepping into throws, doesn't open his body right, those kinds of things. But with him, it was taking all of his strengths and building on those. Becoming a more accurate passer, understanding he can hit all these windows. And forcing throws. Like I said, he's not a wonderful anticipation thrower, but if he can see it, he has the arm to just drill it immediately. And he's not a scared passer. And for Cam Newton, it was building on his strengths and understanding, what he's capable of, what he's not capable of, and just building on his strengths as opposed to, making his weaknesses become strengths.
Absolutely. No, I think you brought up a great point about, there's a lot of questions about if that quarterback can develop. But recently, I mean, we've seen Logan Thomas get drafted. A lot of people are still hyped up about him, hoping that,
Mm-hmm.
in 2 or 3 years he can develop. We're going to see that with Brett Hundley this year, Brandon Bridge as well.
Mm-hmm.
With that idea, what do you think? I mean, what do you think that says about the future for these guys? About what their chances of actually developing and becoming starting caliber quarterbacks is?
Um, both of them definitely need to develop, but in different areas. If we're talking solely about, just building on your strengths and your weaknesses not becoming strengths, I think Bridge may be the better guy just because, he has the better arm. I think he's proven he can be accurate enough. That completion percentage is a little bit misleading. Um, and, I've compared him to like a high school Cam Newton. Like, if you look at young Cam Newton, that's got to be what Bridge looks like what you'd imagine young Cam Newton was. And I think he has a lot of the same flaws. He's not necessarily an anticipation thrower, but if he sees it, he has no hesitation. He's going to hit it immediately, and he has the arm to do it. He has incredible athleticism. and this is something Justice has talked about, athleticism and arm. You got to be able to do something on third down. So, if you're taking these late round developmental guys, those are the guys you want, the ones that can always make a play. The thing with Hundley is he kind of has some of those problems too. I think his footwork is a little better than, say Brandon Bridge, but he definitely has that internal clock issue with throwing. And then with Hundley, he is so bad with dropping his eyes, in the midst of pressure and not keeping his eyes downfield to make a throw, and that's just so hard for me to say he's going to get better at this, because that's just something that's kind of an instinct thing. It's it's too hard to change, in my opinion. So I still think he could be a really good playmaker. I think to some extent you can kind of tailor your offense to what he is. I mean, at the least, he's a more athletic EJ Manuel, and at the least with that you can get some weapons around him, and you have speed at the quarterback position. But they're both still kind of really scary players. I think if you're just talking about only building on strengths, Bridge might be the better guy to go with, in my opinion.
Well, you mentioned areas where they have to prove, and I think this idea is shared by a lot of people. I mean, with you, the work you've done, I definitely think that in your future you are going to be a scout or potentially a quarterback coach. So in a scenario where, let's say, you are Hundley's quarterback coach, how are you helping him make those adjustments to the NFL with the picking up pressure and picking up his eyes when pressure comes?
It's hard. Like I said, it's an instinct thing, and that more than anything, it's tough to teach, because it's a habit that these guys have been doing, since they were younger, and mechanics are the same way. I remember reading in Bruce Feldman's, the quarterback, the modern quarterback. There was, a mention of it taking 10,000 reps, consistent reps to, change a sort of habit, and that can both apply to mechanics and to something like trying to keep your eyes up. With him, it would definitely be a really slow process. I don't think that's something you could force upon him. I think you would try to install a bunch of plays where you force pressure, but also force a route or two that way, to that side of the field, and make sure he's going to have someone in front of him that he can see, and then you start developing, make it a little bit harder, make the pressure come from elsewhere, maybe make the routes a little bit harder to hit on that side of the field when he has to escape. But for something like that, like an instinct thing, I think it's definitely something that you're going to have to go really, really slow with if you want to change it.
Definitely. Before we get into Marcus Mariota versus Washington 2013, where you're gonna break it down, we can show people who are aspiring scouts and want to learn how to scout quarterbacks things to look for. What other things about just quarterbacks in general do you want to share?
I think just one of my philosophies that I'll jump on is I think I agree with the fact that there's a threshold for arm strength, but at the same time, I've tended to like the guys that have superior arm strength, just because like I said, with these NFL windows, they're a lot harder to hit, and if you can throw the ball a little bit faster, it makes these windows easier to hit. At the same time, these guys who have these crazy rocket arms, like say a Matt Stafford or even a Cam Newton, they've always been able to rely on that arm talent, and maybe not have the greatest mechanics. So you definitely kind of want to look for that balance, but I'm definitely adapting the team arm strength mentality, just because there's a lot more you can do with a strong arm than a weak arm.
Absolutely. Before we get to the video, I will say, because I'm sure there's lots of lawyers and people who would like to get money anyway, videos BigBoardDraft is using is not original. It's not considered property of BigBoardDraft. Video is considered to be used under fair use doctrine of the United States Copyright Law, Title 17, U.S. Code, Sections 107 to 118. Videos on the site are used for educational purposes, showing people how to scout, and BigBoardDraft does not claim ownership of any original video content. So now we can get into the video, since we made lawyers very happy that they got
our official statement.
Absolutely. All right, so now let's flip over to Marcus Mariota 2013 versus the Washington Huskies. And let's set it up now. All right, and now we shall begin. Oop, let me work on that. There.
I mean, Some plays in Oregon's offense are kind of like that. There's really nothing to say. He got the ball out pretty much as quickly as he could. Now, this play, I remember watching this game last night. Some people may have wanted Mariota to hit that flats route, but that's a really, with the linebacker as close as he was, that's a really hard throw to hit. I guess it's possible, but I think Mariota's smart in not testing it and just taking off and running.
Well, he's smart. He knew that with his legs he can pick up the first down, so why not?
Exactly. And then on this play, I like that, he clearly sees he has enough room to, stop, set his feet, and make sure the throw is there. Throw was perfect. That was just a terrible drop by the receiver. That should have been a touchdown for sure.
And that's one thing that counts too, incompletion percentage.
Mm-hmm. See, here I understand Mariota wanting to give his shorter guy, the opportunity to run upfield on a 3rd and 15, but at the same time, he had a guy who stopped about 4 yards short of the marker. I'd like to have seen him test that throw. I think it was there. The safety might have gone on the receiver as soon as the throw was made. But I think you definitely give your offense a better chance of, getting that first down. And then, can you rewind it and watch this read option again? I remember watching it last night, and it was definitely a play that bugged me. Here, there's 2 running back sets. The one running back goes into block and chip the defender coming at the running back that theoretically could have gotten the ball, and instead Mariota takes it himself. I think here he definitely should have handed the ball off, because if you look at the blocking again on the side of the way the running back was going, he had a much clearer lane than Mariota had. So I think this was Mariota maybe thinking he was able to do too much, and he ends up not picking up the first down. But then on that read option, he does a good job. The defender pauses. He makes sure to hold that, fake until the last second, gets upfield and slides down before he gets hit. I thought that was a very good play. One thing I like about Oregon's offense is how often they use that fake bubble screen. And then here, 1st and 10, Mariota doesn't want to test anything that he doesn't think is quite there, just takes off, gets a couple of yards. I can respect that.
Yeah, there's still quarterbacks in the NFL who take that risk when they shouldn't, and it results in potentially an interception.
Yeah, exactly. A big thing with NFL passing is calculated risks, and if he doesn't think that throw is worth it on, a 1st and 10 where he doesn't have to complete it, I can totally understand just wanting to take off and run. Here with this play, I remember it might have been a little easier to see in full speed. You don't have to go play full speed, but that screen throw, he definitely waits just a second too late. It takes him too long to get the ball out here, and it lets the defender get too close to the line of scrimmage and break this play up. See, he takes another step that he doesn't really need to make. He would just take the snap, turn, and throw. I think the receiver has a much better chance of being able to create some yardage here.
And on those screenplays, is there a place you'd like that quarterback to put the ball?
Just in front of, like a step in front of the receiver, so he can already get moving a little bit. He doesn't have to stop and drop down for the ball, or he doesn't have to be dormant. He can at least get his feet moving just a bit. That was a smart play by Mariota. He let the defender get as close as he possibly could to him, and then got the ball out to his next best playmaker on that option. That was a smart play. and just another short read option. He's generally pretty good at these. That one earlier, I think, was just 4th and 5. He got a little stressed and made a bad decision.
We just that's one of the things that speaks about composure and just improving in that area.
Yeah, I honestly think there's a little bit about Mariota that in third and longs or 4th down situations he kind of falters a little bit in the way of decision making. I don't think he's necessarily bad there. I just think he has some lapses that might end up hurting him. Like there's a couple where he'll roll out on a big 3rd and long and try to throw back to the middle of the field, and that's pretty concerning. I really, really like how he handles this pressure. Can you go back and play this one again?
Yeah.
I just like how here, the pressure comes, but he keeps his eyes upfield, and he has the general quickness in his feet to just, move out of the way, roll out, and that was a catchable ball. The receiver just dropped it. That was really all Mariota could do on that play.
I'll go back to it one more time just to.
Mm-hmm. And if you notice, he doesn't really drop his eyes at all. He goes back, he's looking for his receiver, pressure comes, and he just moves out. Perfect. That's exactly how that should look. This play, I don't blame Mariota at all here. That play was definitely designed to really just hit that receiver. I just think that was a poor play call on 3rd and 5 to go with the screen pass with, your receivers so spread out like that. I think that was just a poor play call, not necessarily Mariota's fault. This was one of my favorite throws from this game. He lets his receiver get just outside of the linebacker and then makes the throw so that he's balancing, making sure his receivers pass the linebacker, but also at the same time making sure he has plenty of room to run and create some yardage. I thought that was one of the best throws from this game.
That's an NFL timing throw perfectly.
Exactly. But then on the screen throw, he lets it go too low. And I won't really harp on him too much for that one. There's going to be some throws that get away from you. Even the best have some screen throws that get away from him. You don't want to see it, but I won't knock him too hard there because I don't think it's really that big of an issue.
Well, yeah, we even see it with Aaron Rodgers nowadays. Some of those screen passes are low; they're behind the receiver.
Exactly. They just get ugly every now and then, and that happens. Here, one part of me wants to see Mariota hit these 3rd and longs with his arm, but at the same time, you really can't knock him for making the play. Nothing really looks open. You see the guy hitching with he's about 7 yards deep, and maybe he could have picked up the 1st down, but I think Mariota definitely made the right decision to run and take off here. I think Ryan Tannehill overall is his best comparison, but to some extent, just in the way that he handles the pocket, I think he's very Russell Wilson-like in that if he doesn't see what he wants, he's totally comfortable with just taking off and running. But at the same time, he doesn't run when he doesn't really have to.
I think the general fan perception of Ryan Tannehill, it doesn't seem like a great comparison, but really I think even especially after this season where I think he's going to have a big year, that I'd be very happy to have a Ryan Tannehill type quarterback.
Oh yeah, Ryan Tannehill is one of my favorites in the league. I think he's around that top 9 to 12 quarterback area. I think he's really good, especially with Lazor's new offense. I think he's thriving there. This play was just a weird. I'm not going to knock Mariota there at all. It was linebackers just had a lot more space on the edge than he did. They had the angles on him, so I can't really blame him for anything there. If I remember correctly, this is a rollout play, and I know Oregon loves these rollouts on the, close to the end zone. And if I remember correctly, let me watch. Yep, Mariota's very, very patient on this play. I like that, he ends up with a defender right in his face, but he doesn't panic. He just takes his jump back, gives himself space, hits the throw at the, very, very close to the sideline. You can even see him kind of adjust his arm angle a little bit. I just thought that was, definitely one of the better throws in this game from him. And he puts that right on the money. That was a really, really good throw.
Picture perfect, everything you could ask for.
And his receiver even helped him out a little bit, made sure he had his feet in bounds and all that. This play I don't necessarily. Oh, never mind. That's not the play I was thinking of. No, that was a good throw. I was thinking, if you look early on in the throw, he has the dude coming out on the 5-yard out that he could have hit, but it ended up being a receiver farther downfield that he ended up hitting. So that was a good play. That was just 2nd and 8, trying to shorten the 3rd down. I think that was a good throw. Ended up with like a 3rd and 2, I think.
Take what defense gives you and just move.
Always take what the defense gives you. Exactly. At the same time, you want to be aggressive at certain points, but at the same time, you definitely want to just, on a 2nd and 8 like that, just take, the 6 yards that are there, make an easy 3rd down for yourself. That was definitely an Oregon type play. You just have, the linebacker clears out of the middle and lets the seam route come open, and that's just really an easy throw for Mariota, and stuff like that is pretty common in Oregon's offense, and it works in the NFL too. I'm not saying it doesn't. It works especially with tight end pop passes. I know that was something Hugh Jackson tried getting in when Tyler Eifert was healthy. So that's definitely an NFL concept that I think can easily translate for him. And I like how quickly Mariota here understands that he has his hot out to his left, sees that his receiver farther down the field isn't going to be open, just quickly gets it out to the running back, lets him get as many yards as he can. Because you even have a lot of NFL veterans that can't get to their hots well enough, and that's pretty frustrating. This throw, he definitely gets the right look, gets the ball out quick enough. It looks like the throw is a little bit low, so he's not going to get yards after. Oh, it looks like it was actually incomplete. Yeah, I mean, you can't blame it. Throws are going to get away. You definitely want, but Mariota definitely, I think, does have a tendency to overthrow or underthrow passes, just like this one. If you can rewind this one a little bit, this is actually something mechanics-wise that Cam Newton even has a problem with. If you watch him, he doesn't move his body forward. He doesn't move his his upper body forward into the throw. He kind of just lets the rest of his upper body fall back while his arm goes forward, almost like he's jolting himself. And that's going to lead to some issues because if you're not following through to your throw, I mean, and that's true for quarterbacks. It's true for pitchers. If you're not following through, you're not getting the right. You're not putting the correct force into the ball, and it's not going to go necessarily where you want it to. And he overthrows that pass that with these Oregon receivers, that very well could have been a touchdown if you placed that right.
And is that an issue you see consistently with him, or is it more mixed here and there?
He's had some flashes where he's been okay with it, but you even see it there again. He does it, and this time it works out for him. The receiver drops the pass, but it's definitely something. Not transferring his weight is a huge issue in Mariota's game, and I think it's something he could kind of work on. And I think it's something, he doesn't even necessarily have to work on. He can still be okay. Like I said, Cam Newton still has major issues with it, and he's, one of the better quarterbacks in the league. So I think, if he can build on the rest of his strengths, which I think he can, I don't think this weight transfer issue is going to be that big of a deal with Mariota. See there, he was a little bit better with getting his body in sync with the throw, and he puts that one on the money for, I'm pretty sure he gets in right here. Yeah, he tumbles in for a touchdown. And Oregon was really harping on that, trying to get that, the right seam and get the safety out of the way, and it finally worked on that play. And I think over the middle passing was an issue in Mariota's game for a long time. And I remember actually watching this game live last year, and this was kind of the game that sold me. I was like, okay, this dude can throw over the middle of the field well. Because I remember as a redshirt freshman, it was an issue. Earlier on in the year, it was an issue. Um, and part of it was the weight transfer. But he ended up being just a more consistent thrower over the middle, hitting those seam throws than he had before. And I thought that was an interesting development, and he stayed good at it in 2014. So I thought that was nice to see out of him.
And that shows year to year he can improve. So you know that he's putting in the work to make adjustments.
And it wasn't necessarily a weakness to strength thing in the sense of mechanics. He still kind of had that flawed mechanics with transferring his weight. He just ended up being able to hit those throws more consistently. And then that run just there, it was he didn't see what he wanted. 1st and 10, just took the rushing yards he could. I totally respect that. At the same time, I think NFL defenses are going to be a little less lenient in letting him get those yards. But at the same time, I think he shows that he's cool enough to make all those plays and decisions. And then that was actually another bad screen pass from him. He put that one way too high and missed that one. That throw right there is exactly where you want it, with the defender on the inside shoulder of the receiver. He puts it on the outside shoulder. That's exactly where you want that throw. Make sure the defender can't really get a hand on it. And here again, you see Mariota, a defender just gets right in his face, but he keeps cool, keeps his eyes upfield. I mean, this is almost the exact same play as the one before, where he dropped it on the sideline, except he catches it this time. I mean, almost everything about that play was paralleled. And again, Mariota just did exactly what he needed to, got out of the pocket, hit his guy on the sideline, and that time they ended up getting the 1st down.
And again, this is some things that other NFL starting quarterbacks can't do still.
Exactly. I mean, both in the sense of being able to throw on the run and being able to keep their eyes up and get away from pressure as easily as he does. And then here it looks like he was looking for something on the left side of the field. You could kind of see him, moving that way. Doesn't see it. It's a 1st and 15. I understand him just wanting to pick up the yards he can. He gets out of the pocket to the right side because, the defense clearly started shifting his way to the left. Let's see it here again. If I remember correctly, nobody's really open at all on the play. Yeah, everyone's covered. He peels out to the right, picks up. That had to be 30 yards or so at least, and that just is a testament to his athletic ability. I don't think athletic ability is necessary to survive at the quarterback position, but if you're athletic, it definitely helps with keeping plays alive. Russell Wilson, that's a huge part of his game. Is if he doesn't think the throw's there, he can just take off and run at any time. There's this throw, and then there's another one just like this throw a little bit later in the game where it looks like the defense is in zone coverage, and the defender on that side of the field is peeking inside, and Mariota sees that he's peeking inside, hits his guy going on the route to the outside, takes advantage of it as soon as he can, gets a huge gain.
And going back to the throw real quick, is there? Let me just double check.
On this red zone one or the
one leading to the red zone. That's one.
I mean, this is perfect. Yeah, you see that deep defender peeking inside, trying to see something inside, and maybe, maybe it was actually him, at the top of the route. It was just a really well ran route that got the defender to jump inside. But either way, Mariota's timing was perfect. Can we go back to that red zone throw too? Because it looks like they run, the receiver runs like a curl, and Mariota ends up hitting the outside shoulder, and it probably would have been better to try to hit the inside shoulder. I want to watch it again now. Let's see. I mean, that's a tough throw to hit regardless. Yeah, but with the cornerback, turning his body to the sideline, you want to try to put that throw as inside as you can, and at least give your receiver a better shot at getting to that ball. Oregon's offense is weird. It's spread offenses in near the goal line are just a lot harder to get something out of because there's not as much you can disguise, and you have less room to work with when spreads are predicated about having room. So when they try to do these stretch runs with just the quarterback, it's pretty easy to shut down. So I don't really blame him for not completing the play. This That one's a rollout. He sees his guy's not open, tries to take off running, ends up in the end zone. So that was definitely a really good play. And part of it is a testament to his, athletic ability. If you look, you see he really changes direction on a dime and just accelerates into the end zone. With, it looks like there's, 4 or 5 defenders in the area. And one even pretty clearly overruns him because he's able to change direction and come back inside so quickly. That just makes it an easy play for Mariota to finish.
And while athletic ability is a necessity, but that's a nice thing to have in your back pocket.
It certainly helps. Exactly. It sort of turns the game on, into an 11 on 11 as opposed to a 10 on 11. Which that definitely helps. This play, it looks like the guy running over the seam might have been open. It's tough to tell where the safeties are without all 22. You see he kind of gets over the linebacker and comes inside. I feel like he could have hit that throw. It looks like, a sort of crosser route. It looks like it should have been there, but he looks away from it too fast, tries to get out of the pocket, and he gets sacked. So I think, he's going to have to, sit and wait for that route to be open a little bit. I think he's definitely a little hesitant. I think, while he's good at timing, deeper outside routes, some of his over-the-middle throwing, while I think he can hit all the passes, sometimes he's a little hesitant. There he wasn't. There there's 2 defenders there, and he hits the throw. And I think, if you just get him to do that more consistently and be confident, you can hit these throws if you just wait on him, then he can be a really, really talented quarterback. And he's certainly shown flashes, just like that throw right there. It's definitely something he can do. It's just an inconsistency in his game that I think he can build on.
Well, I think in this game especially, this was probably one of his better games where he showed the tools that make you think he can be a great NFL quarterback.
Mm-hmm. And I chose this game because, it had that, but at the same time, it showed some of his, a little bit of his hesitancy, a little bit of his mechanical flaws. It showed the good and the bad. While it still was definitely, one of his better games. It was, like I said, in 2013, it was the one that I kind of was sold. I was like, yeah, this guy is a legit NFL quarterback. This is the one, how I was saying there were 2 plays like that earlier. This one, it's a different route, but you see the outside defender that should have had the deep zone kind of start peeking inside, and I believe that's Josh Huff is able to easily get the outside, and Mariota hits that really easily, finds the soft spot in the zone, makes a deep completion.
And this is the last play, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Another Oregon rollout, not surprised. That was perfect. His guy got open. Braylon Addison really had a great game too. I remember, Mariota was hitting that guy all game. I think that was his 2nd or 3rd touchdown. But that play just, went how it should have, and Mariota completed the pass. So that was, that's all you can ask from him.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at that game, obviously 2014, there's a lot more games for people to catch up on. Obviously, you've done the work, charted Mariota's throws, watched his mechanics. What are your overall thoughts on Mariota?
I like Mariota. He's not my number 1 quarterback. I think Winston is better, but that's not really a knock on Marcus Mariota. I think early on you're gonna have to maybe tailor your offense a little bit to him. or just accept that he's going to run a little bit more, kind of like how Cam Newton was. Cam Newton just worked his legs really well his rookie season and then progressed into becoming a more comfortable passer. And, that style of development worked for him. But at the same time, it is going to be a little difficult to jump from, Oregon's crazy spread to, a little bit more, where he's going to have to be doing more dropbacks, getting his feet in sync, which it wasn't really highlighted in that game all that much. But, there's instances where Mariota's footwork can kind of get out of sync with what he's looking for. That could be an issue, especially with deeper drops. And then, like I said, the route concepts and how much space he's going to have. I think he can hit the throws physically, but if you watch a few other games, and even that one, there was some hesitancy. I remember there was a huge throw in the UCLA game that he almost threw an interception because he waited too long and took a few extra steps that he didn't need to try to hit the throw. Like he wasn't sure if it was there or not. I thought that was a big issue. But overall, his handling of pressure is just unreal, both mentally how he handles it and physically, because he's incredibly explosive. He has plenty of arm. I think he can hit every throw. I think he's a smart player. I think he's just going to have to adjust, and I think he can. Like I said, I think he's about a Ryan Tannehill quarterback. I have about the same grade on Mariota that I did Derek Carr, which was kind of like a late first round. I'd take him higher than that, obviously, just because of how important the quarterback position is. But I think if you, just for reference's sake, if you put him in last year's class, he's probably the second best quarterback. Well, I like Blake Bortles a bit. So he's second or third quarterback behind. Obviously, I think he's clearly behind Teddy. That's not the knock on Mariota. I think Teddy was just an incredible prospect. And then Mariota and Bortles are definitely different. With Bortles, you definitely had to factor in a different type of development, but he was also a very poised player with a lot of athletic ability. So, but overall, I think you're getting a very good quarterback out of Marcus Mariota.
One thing Mariota does have going for him is his knee size. It's the perfect size. It's acceptable.
Exactly. If we're talking about knee size, he kicks Ted's ass. That's for sure.
So looking at Mariota, you've talked about Ryan Tannehill, where you pretty much have him. What would you say is his floor if he doesn't make improvements in the NFL, and where would you say his ceiling is?
I think his ceiling is about where Ryan Tannehill is. I think he, maybe could be a little better than Ryan Tannehill is. I think, in college, Tannehill was a more aggressive passer, but at the same time didn't have the pocket awareness that Mariota showed. So I think they're different in those aspects. And maybe Mariota's acclimation to pressure and how much better he handles that could generate him or propel him to be a little bit better of a quarterback than Ryan Tannehill. So, around that 8 to 10 areas, I think, how good Mariota can be. At the least, I think, Mariota is a more athletic Alex Smith, at the least, because, there's a fear that maybe he ends up being as hesitant of a thrower as Alex Smith is. But at the same time, Mariota has incredible poise. He's athletic. He has the arm to make all the throws. So I think no matter what, you're still getting at least a starter level quarterback out of Mariota. I mean, unless something goes horrifically wrong. But I'd be confident enough in Mariota, for sure.
If you were a team, and obviously the need and demand for quarterbacks means Mariota wants to be pushed up into the top 5 probably. If you're the Tennessee Titans, is he someone you take? Because obviously there's been a lot of talk about how his perfect fit is the Philadelphia Eagles, but outside of Philadelphia, where do you see good fits for Mariota?
I don't like him in Tennessee just because I don't like Wiz. I don't think he's that good of a coach. I don't think Mariota fits the style of quarterback Wiz is even looking for. I think Wiz likes those super mediocre quarterbacks like Nick Foles and Zach Mettenberger. I swear they're the same quarterback. I don't know why they or not Nick Foles. There was talk of them getting Nick Foles. So I never understood that because Zach Mettenberger is like the same quarterback. I feel like as much as I want the Jets to give another shot to Geno Smith, I feel like he could do well there. I know Ben Albright has been saying that the Washington Redskins are a very real possibility for Marcus Mariota, and um, Jay Gruden is not a very good coach either. I think Mariota could do okay there, so long as they don't, force too much upon him like they kind of did with RG3. That was a different coaching staff, but still, I think there's plenty of offensive talent in Washington for Mariota to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's probably a bad perception of Washington, but I'd prefer, for Mariota's sake, he doesn't go to Washington with Jay Gruden.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't like it to happen, but I'm hearing it's a pretty real possibility, so that'll be interesting to see how that one develops on draft day.
So we've talked about a lot. So we've talked about the size of the quarterback. We've talked about how much should the numbers, level, competition affect evaluation, physical tools, things that can make or break quarterback, biggest obstacles they face. Obviously, now this part might be sarcasm. Pro days, knee size are the two most important parts of all the scouting process. So when you watch pro days, make sure that over film and everything else.
Exactly. Pro days have taught us anything. It's that they're the most predictive factor of success.
Absolutely. And Derek, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I mean, I've said it, my friend. The growth you've made in a short time. I say this jokingly, obviously, but I mean, this speaks to the growth you made. Like a few years ago, you loved Brett Hundley, but as you've developed and stuff. I mean, everyone has that type of guy, but I mean,
Yeah.
the growth you've made just evaluating all prospects, but especially quarterbacks, and the work you do now, and you're 17, which is just ridiculous. I tell you what, man, I would bet life savings you are going to be involved in the scouting or coaching.
Thanks, man. I mean, that really means a lot. I've definitely seen some growth in myself, and it's not all been me. I've had a lot of great editors. I've had close friends like you that have just made it a very an easier process to get to make myself better. And it's just been really cool to kind of see others appreciating my development, and that really means a lot. Support from you and from everyone.
Yeah, I'm like Matt Flynn. I'm the reliable backup who's always there to help.
Hey, you're only as good as your backup, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And before we go, where can people follow you on the Twitter, and where can they find all of your outstanding draft work?
You can follow me at QBClass, QBKLASS, and then you can find my work at Football Savages as well as BigBoardDraft.
Everyone, I want to thank you for checking out the How to Scout Quarterback series. I mean, in upcoming days and weeks, we're going to have how to scout running backs, fullbacks count too. We're going to have tight ends, wide receivers, offensive line, defensive line, edge rushers, linebackers, cornerbacks, safeties, everything. I mean, if maybe Seth wants to put together even How to Scout Kickers podcast. I mean, who knows, but it's all coming in the future.
They're people too.
Absolutely. Kickers and punters, we have to set it up for them.
Exactly.
Yeah, all right. So, everyone, I want to thank you for listening.